guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hey, hello, my name is Angela, I'm a lawyer, and on this channel we simplify legal concepts, explore intriguing cases, and uncover the law's influence on business and culture. Today we're going to be diving into a topic that every aspiring or current musician should know about: record label deals. Also, for those of you guys who are just into popular culture and have heard some of the horror stories about record label deals and just want to get a better understanding of how those deals work, how those deals go sour, this video is for you. Whether an artist is dreaming of signing with a major label or wanting to go independent, knowing how these deals work and knowing the pros and cons of each type of deal is going to be crucial. So in today's video, we're going to do a brief overview of just that. Now, like I said, if you're into popular culture, you have probably heard numerous stories about artists fighting with their record labels over their contracts and just the relationships going sour. Just to highlight a few, Taylor Swift. Recently, Drake just filed a lawsuit against his record label, Universal Music Group. So these record label deals and the contracts that govern them are super important to understand. And so we're gonna get into that today. Before we jump into the video, for any of you guys who are on the channel and you are looking for the law school and lawyer content where we talk about how to level up your legal journey, we do unfiltered raw conversations about our legal journey. That content has now moved to Patreon. I will leave a link down below where you can check out the different tiers and join the Patreon. This past week, the conversation we have was about navigating the legal field as a minority. Not only did we talk about sort of like the negative things and the things that we have to deal with, but we talked about how to thrive despite those things. Those are the types of conversations that we are having over there, just raw, unfiltered. And so if you're interested, again, I will leave the link to the Patreon down below. Let's get into the video. So what is a record deal? So a record deal is essentially a contract between an artist and a record label in which the record label invests in you as an artist and invests in your career and your trajectory as an artist. The types of things that are going to be in your record label contract will vary by which type of agreement that you have with the label, but the types of things you can expect it to cover is marketing, distribution, production, all sorts of things like that. And it can go down to the sale of merch. It just really depends on what the contract says. Now, in exchange for investing in your career, the record label then gets a portion of your revenue from your sales. So that's sales of music, and it could be sales of other things, concert sales, ticket sales, those types of things. It just really depends on what type of contract that you have with your label as an artist. That sounds pretty good, right? This record label puts a bunch of money into me, helps me blow up, and then everything is great. Yeah, I have to pay them a cut, but they're doing so much for me that it's worth it, right? It sounds right. However, things don't always turn out like that. There's a lot of risks and a lot of trade-offs when you enter into these types of agreements. So it's very crucial for artists to understand what the contracts with these labels say, because it can be risky. So again, with record labels, there's really many different types. It really just depends on what the artist and the labels agree on. However, we're gonna talk about 5 common record label types in this video today. So the first type of deal is a traditional deal, what's known as a traditional deal. Now this is when the record label literally handles everything for you. So everything I just talked about, distribution, marketing, production, scheduling, all those things the record label handles for you. But in exchange for that, they get a larger portion of your revenue. This one is known as the traditional agreement because this is what a lot of artists have agreed to, especially in the past, earlier on in the kind of music business. These are the type of deals people were agreeing to. I suspect it's just because they just hadn't wised up, they hadn't lawyered up, and that was sort of the standard. But since then, we've had artists kind of break through, gain leverage, gain knowledge, and then seek to kind of negotiate these traditional deals a little bit more and really look into other types of deals, which some we will cover in today's video. So for reference, a traditional deal can be risky because they get so much of your revenue. And so it can almost be not profitable for you as an artist. You could have a #1 record doing great, but the label is taking so much of your profits that you're really not realizing a lot of your gain. So a popular artist that had a traditional deal that sort of went bad is the artist JoJo from back in the day. If you're a millennial like me, you probably know who I'm talking about. Her most popular song was a song called Get Out, Leave. I'm not gonna sing it because the vocals are no, but Google it, you'll know what I'm talking about. JoJo had a traditional record deal with the label Blackground Records, and she faced years of contract disputes over their deal. Now you'll remember she had this breakout song and she sort of just kind of fell off kind of out of nowhere. And that happens a lot of times with artists, and a lot of times people just assume like, oh, you know, they're a one-hit wonder. So many people make that assumption, but a lot of times the appearance of a fall off is really just the result of an artist having issues with their record label. So JoJo, for example, many have said that her career was essentially stolen by her label because she had so many disputes with them. They went on to shelve her music. They had so much control on when she could release music, the types of things that she could do, that it really stifled her ability to make music and release music because she was stuck in this contract that she could not get out of. So this example really kind of highlights how unfavorable contract terms can really put a lock on the artist's creativity and overall control of their career. And the next type of deal we're going to discuss are 360 deals. Now, I think many of us are familiar with the term 360 deals, and we know it's not a good thing, it's a negative thing. So for those who don't though, this is what I was talking about a little earlier in the video, where labels not only take a share of your revenue from your music, they take it from literally everything. That's why it's 360. It's full circle. They take it from your merch. They take it from your touring. They take it from any endorsements, sponsorships that you have. They get a piece of the whole pie, and they get a piece of every single thing that you earn. This is a terrible type of deal, and it is my opinion that no one should enter into these types of 360 deals. And some of you guys are probably wondering, like, why would anybody agree to that? You have to put yourself in the position of a starving artist, someone who has big dreams, they just need the shot. A lot of times they don't have legal representation because they can't afford it. A lot of times they see it as their only opportunity to make it, to fulfill their dreams. And so when you think about it that way, it's a little bit easier to understand how artists may get themselves in these types of situations. Similar to the JoJo situation, some of you guys may be familiar with the rapper Lupe Fiasco, who had a sort of 360 deal situation. Now, from what I can tell, his deal didn't necessarily start off as a 360, but contract negotiations essentially gave him the consequences or realities of a 360 deal. So what happened with him was there was a sort of stifling of his career because of the lack of control he had with sort of his creative direction, and as well as the release of his album, particularly his 2011 album that was called Lasers. Essentially, there was a dispute between him and his label. His label wanted him to have a more commercial sound, you know, a more poppy, you know, radio friendly sound. But that is not what he built his audience upon, and that's not what his true supporters and diehard fans wanted to hear. So Lupe was actually very vocal about how frustrating that was for him, and his fans weren't happy. They didn't want that commercially sound. They wanted the Lupe that they had grown to know and love, and they wanted to continue to hear his creative spin on his music, not Atlantic Records' proposed commercializing of his music. So with his 360 deal, not only did it limit his creativity and his ability to control what he put out, it also again took from him in every single aspect, because again, they had their hands in the pot for literally everything. So the next type of deal we're going to talk about is distribution deals. Now, these types of deals are known to be a little bit more artist friendly because the record label has more of a limited role. They don't have creative control. They don't get a cut of everything. They're really just helping you with distributing your music. So the artist keeps a lot of his or her control over their music, which again, off the top sounds like a great thing. But a caveat to that, or something to remember in those situations, is unlike the 360, unlike the traditional, the artist is pretty much responsible for everything else, right? So that creates a lot of responsibility on the artist. Now, for a lot of artists, this can be troubling because as an artist, I want to be in the studio, I want to be focused on my craft, but I also really have a business to run. I have to get marketing in place. I have to get production in place. I have to get everything but distribution in place and delegate to teams and delegate to people to help me do this. They don't have that big support of these big name labels. So that is something to keep in mind. A good example of this would be none other than Master P. He was probably one of the first and most widely known people to have one of these distribution deals back in the 1990s, which is pretty kind of revolutionary. So Master P of No Limit Records entered into a distribution deal with Priority Records. The deal was revolutionary because Master P's No Limit Records was keeping 85% of its revenue. That's huge. That's a big number in these types of situations. However, when the artist retains that much control, a lot of their success hinges on their ability to manage those other things because they don't have the strong support of the record label to promote you know, the music. They're just doing distribution. They're not doing the marketing and all the bells and whistles that some of the other deals provide for. So it's very important for artists and smaller labels to have an infrastructure in place to make sure that they can handle this, because if not, this can lead to burnout, a decline in the quality of music, because you're just kind of pulled in too many places and spread too thin. So that's just something to be mindful of. Is yes, while revolutionary, while this is more beneficial to the artist as far as getting more of your profits, or retaining more of your profits, I should say, there is sort of that more to whom much is given, much is required type thing. Okay, so the next type of deal we're going to talk about is sort of a quasi situation where we're talking about a joint venture. This is where the artist and the label create a partnership where control and profits is shared between the two parties. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a 50-50 split. Partnership is not always 50-50, but it is a partnership in where those kind of rights, obligations, and benefits are divided between the two sides. These days, these types of deals are actually pretty popular, and that's why a lot of times you'll hear that an artist has their own label, but they're also signed to a larger label. Now, the most popular one I can think of is none other than Cash Money Records, taking over for the 99 and the 2000s, okay? Cash Money Records. Now, Cash Money Records struck a joint venture deal with Universal Music Group, surprise, surprise. And this allowed Cash Money Records to retain a lot of control, especially as it relates to the artists under that. So we're thinking Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj, Drake, you know, all those big names. However, just like with any contract, any deal, there are still risks associated. And this has been shown, particularly with Cash Money Records, as it relates to issues within the labels. As you guys may recall, there was a big dispute between the founder of Cash Money Records, Birdman, also known as Baby, and Lil Wayne. There were all sorts of accusations and disagreements flying about some of the dealings with the revenue and how the money was being distributed. So this is just to point out that even if you can get a joint venture structure with a small label and a big label, it's important for artists to still make sure their agreements with that smaller label are still defined and set, so that you're not running into internal conflicts such as Lil Wayne did with Cash Money Records. The last type of deal we're going to talk about today, and I think it's important to address this one, is independent deals. Now, independent deal is typically going to be with an indie record label who is a lot smaller than some of these big record labels, and they tend to be much more artist friendly than the bigger record labels because they allow the artist to have much more creative control, much more autonomy. And while they do provide less resources, they do allow the artist to do things like retain their masters, which is huge. So your masters are the original recordings of all your songs, which is super important because owning your masters as the artist gives you full control over the licensing and distribution of your music. That means you get paid for whenever your music is played. That could be with streaming, TV commercials, wherever you get revenue from that. That is huge. Some of you guys might be familiar with Taylor Swift's issue with her label where they literally sold her masters, so she lost all control. She sort of took back her ownership by re-recording all of her songs and owning those masters. So that was revolutionary for her. I think Prince did something very similar to that. And so owning your masters is huge as an artist. While historically that's not something artists have really been in control of, it's becoming increasingly popular with artists. You'll hear Jay-Z talk about it. You'll hear big artists talking about the importance of owning your masters. So back to the independent deals, while they can give the artist full creative control or a lot of creative control and can be very beneficial for the artist, there are, you know, risks and cons associated with that as well, because again, sometimes artists don't feel they have the proper support and backing. An example of this is the artist Chance the Rapper, who actually rose to fame as an independent artist, but after his album The Big Day received sort of mixed reviews, people claiming he fell off or he wasn't that great, many people questioned whether he should have had the backing of sort of a big machine behind him to help him address issues such as quality control, marketing, and those types of things that those larger music labels help address. So you guys have probably noticed a common theme with each and every deal type that we've discussed in this video. There are pros and cons to every type. There are pros and cons to other types that we didn't discuss today. The biggest takeaway from this video is that artists should be aware and informed about what they are agreeing to upfront. Again, some of the pros: financial support for production and marketing. You could be the best singer in the world, but if you don't have the push, the marketing behind you, who's gonna know it, right? Another one is access to industry connection and expertise. Again, artists are here to sing and do music and focus on their crafts. The support of people who have maneuvered the industry before, or who has a friend of a friend when they want to put you on certain platforms, those are valuable things. Another pro is just the exposure. These labels can give you exposure because, again, they have access to these radio stations that will play your songs. They have deals in place. They can push your music more and get a wider distribution of your music. A quick reminder about some of the cons. Probably the biggest one is the financial impact. You are not going to take home all of your money. And if you don't structure your deal properly, the label might be making more money than you. And you might not even be this rich person that you think you might be because you're an artist. Again, just because your music is played doesn't mean you're making the big bucks if your contract is set up to where these labels are getting so many pieces of your revenue. Another con that we kind of hadn't touched on yet was advances, label advances. Labels will give you an advance on your contract and, to kind of put you out there, but it's sort of like a debt you kind of have to repay. You typically repay that as you profit, and they just recoup their money that way. If you don't ever recoup your advance, then you're indebted to the record label. So that's something that is important to highlight. Also, again, just sort of the lack of creative control as an artist. If you give them the ability to say when you release music or what type of music you have to release, that could very much stifle your creativity and could have a very negative impact on your career overall, similar to how we talked about with JoJo. So for anybody watching this and want to know how you can avoid these types of situations, hire a lawyer if you can. A lawyer should always be looking over these types of contracts for you, specifically an entertainment lawyer. Also, just be willing to negotiate. Don't be willing to take the first thing you see just because you're super hyped about the possibility of getting a record deal. And then also do your research. If you don't understand what a contract provision says, ask, learn, research it. Like Jay-Z said, Google's your friend, bruh. Understanding record label deals can be a game changer for artists and allow them to avoid very sticky situations. Whether you sign with the label, go independent, the most important thing is to protect your craft, protect your work, and protect yourself. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. If you have any questions or experiences to share, please drop them down below in the comments. If I have any artists watching this, comment down below a little bit about yourself, who you are, where people can find your music, all sorts of things like that. We'd love to check you out. Again, if you're here and you're looking for that law school content, we have moved that law school content over onto Patreon. I'll leave a link in the comments below for you to find that and join the Patreon, where you can get unfiltered insight, guidance, and conversations on your legal journey and how to level up within your legal journey. With that, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.